I don't really remember much past. I mean, book two is definitely going to be uncharted territory for me.
Just generally in life, you don't remember much past this book. That's the only thing in your head.
No, no. I read this book, ironically, on the same night that I may have gotten a. And then when I was 18 years old. And then, yeah, a lot of stuff since then has been pretty blurry, but, I discovered alcohol in the meantime, so it's not like.
Oh, good.
Unrelated, you got some kids.
I got some. What?
Hello and welcome to the Bridge Burners Book Club, where together we read, discuss, criticize, and get excited fantasy. I'm your host, Sean, and with me is my co-host, Tyler.
That's me.
And our co-host, Ben.
Ben Bowie, and I'm thatching my ass off over here.
We're excited to have you along with us each week as we through the books we love. So, last week I said it was the transitional chapters, and this week we get the kickoff of this extended chase scene.
The one thing I noticed about the transition here is they're really kind of set up, and it really feels like Rand is setting up for his adventure. The next entire chapter is in the stables.
I know.
Still prepping for that adventure. Okay. He's not really setting out quite yet. We still have a little bit more to chat about.
We could leave. Talked about the horses for a little bit. How's that sound?
Well, I mean, hey, one thing that I think Robert Jordan does well is get some of the realities. You follow these people pretty close, and there's not really glossing over a whole lot of what they're doing other than the pooping.
Pretty much. I'm excited to get into these chapters, but before that, I don't have a question, or rather, I have a different kind of question slightly.
It's a command instead of a request.
You know what? Let's call it a question. I'll say it as a question. That's my question.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about what we've been reading lately, and I assume it's probably something you like, because most of the things I think we read are probably things we like, because I usually just stop if it's not. But maybe it's. I don't know.
Let's hold the fuck on, Sean. I'm going to turn this question around on you because you don't ever get to talk first. So, Sean.
Oh no.
What have you been reading?
Oh no. Oh shit.
Never saw it coming.
Well, I would love to tell you what I've known about this for a long time. I wouldn't even say I've been told by people. All the fantasy authors I love always talk about this author, who is Robin Hobb. That's not her real name, but that is the pen name she went up. She wrote this particular series of books, which is the Farseer trilogy. I believe this world it's in is called the Elderlings, and there's a few trilogies now or sets of books in that world. But she switched to that pen name. I guess she's sort of previously been writing in sort of a mixed set of genres, and it wasn't catching on commercially. And then this was a commitment to fantasy. So I read The Assassin's Apprentice, the first book in the Farseer trilogy. I haven't read the other two yet. That book, and I'm assuming the rest are written, it's in a first person style, and it's like a memoir kind of, or a life story. And it's written very much, I'd say, in the style of something like Dickens, or even H.P. Lovecraft kind of writes in that style, or Edgar Allan Poe, or a lot of older authors in general seem to write in that first person.
An oral history.
Yeah, someone telling a story of either their life or a journey they like that. It's very much got that. It was when I first arrived in this town that I first began to notice that I was different from everyone else. And you sort of get this ponderous, introspective character study that starts as a kid, and you see person and the events that lead them to who they are eventually. And it is fantasy for sure. It involves the use of magic, and obviously it's called The Assassin's Apprentice, so it's about someone being trained to be an assassin in a large part. Written in that style, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as opposed to a lot of the fantasy stuff I read, because with something I read recently, the First Law books are very much character based, but a lot of them, we're reading Wheel of Time right. Fantasy stuff is very much descriptive of the world around in a grand way. But this is very focused narrowly on this one story. It's the emotional connections. This character sort of is like an orphan, of course, very person and makes these bonds with characters, but before long, it's like that character leaves out of the story or something really bad happens to them, and it's like gut-wrenching. I teared up quite a few times just in this first book. I was really enjoying it quite a bit. I had to read the rest in this series. I can't even think of what to compare it to necessarily in like the world of fantasy. I sort of listed these other things. Have you guys read anything that sort of reminds you of that style, at least in fantasy or otherwise?
You know, I read that trilogy. I liked it, and I can't remember anything about it. And it was only like 2 years ago, I think. But it was also during COVID, and I read so much during that period. But I enjoyed it.
It's been like probably 8 or I read most of that first book in a hot tub in a house we were staying at, so I very specifically associate it with a specific hot tub.
Hot tub fantasy, a new genre.
Hot tub fantasy, my favorite genre. I actually really enjoyed that. That's what's his name, Fitz Loyalty or Fitz.
Chivalry Farseer, I think is what they end up calling him.
I think it's kind of cool. It's a themed fantasy, I think. There's a lot of tropes in that story, and I think she just kind of like leans into it. And I really like what I could compare it to.
I don't know how we could sum it up better than in the Wikipedia, Steven Erikson describes its first-person narrative as a quiet seduction.
It's very subtle. It also kind of reminds me of, we were talking about the Kingkiller, and this sort of reminds me of that a little bit in the way that you have this narrator telling the story. And it's good stuff. Highly recommend. Makes me kind of want to branch out from fantasy a little bit and maybe go and read some, I don't know, Dickens or something like that. I don't know. But maybe something more highly regarded that I haven't read.
Then I think, Sean, if you want something that is a little bit branched out from fantasy but has a tighter focus, I read recently a book called The Alewives by Elizabeth. It's a historical fiction. It's set in a city in eastern France, like France and Germany. I don't know. They really don't have it. It's not a hard line at this point in like the 1300s, right after the Black Death, like the year after the Black Death. It's 2 widows in this really poor part of town, plus like the wife of the town drunk decide that they need to start brewing some beer to make some money. And it's a really tightly focused story on them doing that and in the process solving.
Hell yeah.
And it's really cool. It's a brisk read, only like 150, 230 pages. Actually, I misestimated that. The story moves along quite nicely. It's really good writing. I really enjoyed it. It's like talks a lot about just like what women's issues were, things that a lot of just like how beer is made, how the justice system worked. It reminded me of Pillars of the Earth, if you've read that or anything like that stuff by Ken Follett, focused on everyday life in the Middle Ages. But instead of like focusing on or something like Ken Follett would do, is this is like just 3 women going into small business together. Getting back to what we were talking about, the pandemic, and also it's interesting because it really explores how people were dealing at the time with like, man, we just saw a quarter of our population die and like this town was like ruined, and now we're just kind of trying to rebuild from that, and how society kind of picks itself back up is interesting.
The Black Plague, or
yeah, because the Black Death is just dead. It's like right before the story.
Okay. I noticed a while back, like 10 years ago now, but I was like, man, I have read almost entirely books by men, especially in the fantasy world. I knew I needed to make an effort to read more books written by women. I do consciously think of that. Read a lot of sci-fi. You know, I love Ursula Le Guin.
Susanna Clarke.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about the same thing as well. Like, there's a lot of really fantastic women fantasy authors. A couple of years ago, I just looked up, like, what are the top 10? And I started reading through some.
There's a lot. I think there's more now in sci-fi and fantasy. And some of the big ones out there, like N.K. Jemisin is like big time literary author, literary awards and stuff like that. And
in sci-fi, and Octavia Butler I really love, so highly recommend any of their books. But okay, great. Tyler just slid his recommendations in there. So Ben, what you been reading?
Well, have you guys heard of a little author, Dan Brown? No, I'm just kidding. I'm reading 3 books, bouncing between the 3, starting with, actually, funny enough, a novel, historical fiction, also set in the 1300s, I believe before death. So this is pre-plague storyline here.
Ben's a pre-plague kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm a pre-plaguer.
Yeah, I'm definitely post-plaguer.
This is called The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. It is also set in a monastery in the Italian mountains, I believe in the Alps. And the author Umberto Eco is a known semioticist. I don't know if that's a word, but linguist, and is a medieval. And I believe this is his only novel, but it's very slow moving and it just breaks into random spouts of Latin. Entire chapters spent just describing the figuring and artwork around. So it's pretty slow. It is interesting, but I've been in between bouts of working through that. I've already mentioned, I think, on this podcast, Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which is violent and incredibly the descriptions of nature in the Wild West and brutal, and it's really good, but it's hard to read because it's just a bloodbath from start to finish.
It makes you like really want to be there and then also not want to be there at all.
Yeah. I was watching National Geographic, just a little docuseries on national parks, and Big Bend in Texas, which is right on the Mexican border, I believe is like almost exactly where Blood Meridian is set on that border area. Picturing this beautiful park just soaked in blood. So it made a very metal viewing experience. So I'm almost done with that, but I'm also reading something much more light and easy to read. Miss Goldman, who's a stand-up comedian. It's his memoirs. Really love him. Really funny and very touching stand-ups about being basically incapacitated by depression. And so, as it sounds, this book is very light and also touches on anxiety and depression throughout his childhood leading up to his big breakdown.
Yeah, he seems like a sensitive guy.
He was a sensitive little lad who loved his mommy. That one just blasting through it, so I probably will just read that. Circle back to the more laborious but much more well-written books. Not to knock Gary Goldman, but it's kind of weird going from Cormac McCarthy to a stand-up comedian's memoirs.
Yeah.
There's definitely times for both.
Oh, yeah.
Umberto Eco. The only thing I knew him from was, I kind of looked up at one point who he was, but I didn't know he wrote fiction. I just knew him of his famous essay, Fascism or Eternal Fascism, 14 Ways of Looking at a Black Shirt, which is an essay 5, which is like the best overall description I've heard of what fascism really is. And it lists off basically points. And if something meets a lot of these, it kind of falls into that category. And it works pretty well if you're honest about it. But everyone tries to twist these things into being like, well, you're the real fascist.
I keep finding reasons in the last decade or so to keep looking up that article and looking at that list of things that about fascism.
Pretty weird, pretty strange.
Remember El Duce.
Yep, absolutely. So that's where he's pulling a lot from, is like his memory of the cultural impact of fascism is very real. So yeah.
All right. Well, with that, should we get into this week's read?
Do it, my friends. I would enjoy that. Chapter 10, Leave Taking. Rand, Matt, and Perrin nervously gather in the inn stables while Lan prepares the horses for the journey. The boys betray their insecurity to each other as they trade jabs about the weapons they carry. Joins the group, but before they can leave, Egwene appears in the doorway, prepared to join them. Matt and Rand attempt to talk her out of the idea before their objections are silenced by Moraine, who quickly accepts Egwene's addition as being part of the pattern. Now in need of a mount, Rand suggests leaving enough coin to pay for the use of Tom Maryland's horse when abruptly the Gleeman reveals himself as having been listening from the loft all along. Rand lends Egwene the use of Bella, and with one final addition to the group, they exit the stables and make to leave town when suddenly, as Rand spots a dark creature known as a dragcar watching them from the skies.
We kind of started before talking about this chapter and what happens in it, which is not a ton, but it's a fairly quick chapter, lengthwise anyway. Kind of a fun little chapter, actually, even though they didn't leave yet. I kind of enjoyed the banter, especially like at the beginning. Rand, Matt, and Perrin are all kind of standing around checking each other's get up out. Matt's like, oh, what's that sword you got there? I think you're like a cool guy now with your sword. And then Perrin's just like shuffling around like, yeah, I totally don't have a badass axe on me that's clearly made for killing, not chopping.
Axe tucked into his waistband like a boner in English class.
I thought it was pretty funny because, from everything I know about teenagers, Matt's probably jealous because obviously having a sword and an axe is way cooler than your weird little shepherd bow, man, Matt. So
He does concede, he's like, no, I'm just playing, bro. I just got my bow. And then Lan's like, bows are real weapons. God damn it.
I feel like Lan, he's like, you're all these, and you know what? Matt is fine with his bow. Actually, a bow's a real weapon, and you shut the fuck up.
Then Tom Maryland comes in with, and my flute.
I feel like Lan's also, he's like defending Matt. He's the only one that I don't think he calls Perrin blacksmith, and he calls Rand sheep herder. But I don't think he has a name for Matt, at least as of yet.
Because what does he do?
Yeah, he doesn't have a job.
What would you say you do around here, Matt?
Your dad is the... Is that a hereditary thing? Well, I mean, probably it is a hereditary thing, but is it like a hereditary thing?
I'm the guy with fingerless gloves. Every town needs one.
He's the lovable rascal.
And also Hood Kid, and he's also... Yeah.
Yep. Hood guy, fingerless gloves.
Yeah, what else happens? They check out each other's weapons, and
Egwene gives them a heckin' spook.
yeah, Egwene just kind of appears in the doorway, and I like how they're sitting in the barn, and at the beginning, Lan's like, so Perrin, you checked out the barn, right? You made sure we're all good. Being super careful about everything. He's talking to everybody about how careful they need to be and how dangerous this journey's going to be, and he's alerting. And then all of a sudden, Egwene just appears in the doorway, and everyone's surprised. And that's all it took, is a girl just kind of sneaking up quietly on the barn, and that could have been a Trolloc.
Yeah.
She definitely disconnected her U-braid before she snuck out. She was coming a mile away.
Whipping side to side on her.
She needs a prehensile camera braid. There's a moment in here where they're talking, and then they start talking about, okay, what's the deal? What do the Trollocs really want with us? And they all together shuffle away from Lan. I kind of marked it there that was a funny moment. As sketchy as I felt last week that like how Moraine talked Rand into leaving, at least he talked to his dad before he went. It seemed like the other two guys, Moraine and Lan, just showed up and said, hey kids, don't tell your parents, but you're leaving with us forever. Come on. And they're like, okay, let's do it.
Just leave him a note. It's fine. And then Egwene shows up, and Rand and Matt are both like, no, Egwene, you can't. Trollocs after us and stuff. It's going to be dangerous. And then Moraine's instantly just like, no, it's fine. It's written into the pattern now. So, just immediately, like, what did you guys think that means, really? Kind of sounds like she's just saying whatever happens, happens. Like, well, she showed up, therefore it's part of the pattern, so we have to accept her.
Yes, I think maybe having read a little bit more, it means a little bit more in that Matt, Perrin, and Rand have such gravitational that are around them that someone showing up in an instance like this can't be coincidence. It has to be part of their fate.
Yeah.
She also could just mean like, it is what it is.
Well, getting down the chapters, Moraine says like that the first moment she saw Egwene, I think she says that she knew she was able to channel, and it's like, well, then why didn't you just want to bring her or tell her that anyways? I don't know. Seemed funny that she just kind of forgot about it. It's also with all the things happening that she actually could have just overlooked that and been like, we got to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, or like she's important but not as important as what's going on with Rand.
Right.
And the rest of the other two. Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. I think she does want Egwene to come along. So when she shows up, she's like, oh no, jackpot. Here's this other powerful channeler that I can get to come with us. I don't really remember everything about this, but I'm feeling like her and Lan are kind of like kids. You guys got to go out and like, oh, we need powerful kids. Let's grab some.
Although Lan's just like, wait, what? You're gonna take? What are you doing? And then he just shuts up.
Before we leave this chapter, because it was pretty brief, but I just that Egwene's skirts were not divided for riding. He explicitly states they're not divided riding skirts. So that's an important thing to watch.
The sight of her socks excites Rand. Oh, and I just want to call out the character here, Bella the horse, does show back up, and she is back in the story.
Oh yeah.
I was concerned about her with the Trolloc attack, but
She's a champ.
Yeah, no, this is where she starts to shine, and I really like the characterization of the horse that the horses get, because Cloud the next little bit.
Yeah, Moraine's like, actually, you were right, Rand. Bella's kind of a badass. And I think Rand even doubts Bella a little bit down there, so never count Bella out.
Boy, was he wrong.
So yeah, they accept that Egwene's gonna. They're like, okay, all right, let's go. Wait, we need a horse for Egwene. What are we gonna do? They look over and they're like, oh, we'll just take Tom Maryland's horse and leave him a bunch of money. And which seems to be that's like a great solution to everything that happens in the Anna Moraine's just like, oh yeah, we'll just give you a bunch of gold. That'll take care of the problem.
Oh, you Hicks don't realize we're fucking rich. So no, yeah. Oh no, we resolve all of our problems. Which is, if you can just spread around some money, you can probably get through a lot of
Then immediately when they say that, a voice comes from above in the loft, and Tom Maryland's up there, and he's been there the whole time, and apparently Perrin, fucked up and didn't actually search up there, and Lan just looks at him like, I thought you looked. And Tom Maryland's like, I'm not taking my horse. And he hops down, and he's like, you know what? I'm coming with you. I love it when he drops down, though. He looks at Lan standing there with his sword half drawn, and he's like, there's no need for that. I am not cheese for slicing. Tom Maryland in there occasionally. We do get a little bit more of the silly interactions that Rand seems to be having with Egwene and his pull between, or really just his desire to tell her that she's not cool enough to go on an adventure and stay there. He just goes, how did you find out we were leaving? Rand demanded. Anyway, you can't go with us. We aren't leaving for the fun of it. The Trollocs are after us. She gave him a tolerant look, and he flushed and stiffened indignantly.
Oh, he stiffened all.
She's pretty good at like quipping back, and just being like, Rand, you're being stupid. But what do you really see in Rand? He seems like kind of an asshole, which is mostly a teenage young guy thing who's never even been in a relationship and only in a little town.
Yeah, I feel like there's a steady like kind of build up through these chapters of both like the way he confronts Egwene and the way he thinks about her as well, like where it's pretty confrontational and misogynistic almost, or like at least he's very confused and seems to be unnecessarily negative at that point. So yeah, so they head out the door, and I was like, one thing I really liked here as they're leaving town is like they come across the group of villagers who are gathered to like be the check everything out. So John Thane, he's leading the town watch around, and they're knocking on doors and checking stuff out. And I just thought that was a cool contrast to previously, like last time they went out into the town, there was a giant mob of people with some of these guys in it, being like, "Row, we're gonna kill Moraine or whatever." And now they're kind of going around just being more organized. So good job, guys. Town is coming together. And after that, the only thing that we got is like the Drakkar comes. I think that's a pretty cool description. This thing flying through the night.
Yeah. Just kind of looking up in the sky at the moon and sees wings cross it and thinks it's a bat at first, which basically, I mean, that's kind of the description it gives.
The slow, powerful sweep of a bird of prey. The body of it had to be as large as wings, ... I don't know. The wings what? The wings what? Rand, finish your sentence. We're just supposed to be really spooked by this thing. It certainly seems like he is.
Robert Jordan leaving some descriptions on the table there.
Well, as they quickly move on, we'll quickly move on to Chapter 11.
Chapter 11, The Road to Taren Ferry. With a drag car in the skies and Trollocs at their backs, the party rides at full gallop down the North Road, looking to Lan as their guide. They ride only long enough for Moraine to channel the one power into the horses, lending them the strength to continue on. The drag car continues to track their progress, leading Moraine to summon an unnatural fog to mask their movement. After a few more hours at Taren Ferry, they awaken Master Hightower, the ferryman, who is convinced into taking them across the river by the proffering of several gold coins.
This chapter also pretty quick. Basically, they ride down the road for a while and get high, and the Drakkar's flying above.
Moraine does some horse magic in there. I like that. Kind of like kicking this off. The first paragraph of this, like I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's just talking about how they're road, they're all lined up, the horses' tails. It's just like a really nice, very compact description of what's going on. It talks about what Rand's doing, but you have in your mind this awesome picture of them just like flying down the road in a line in your head. I like that. Getting to it. Like we said, Robert Jordan is really good when he's kind of describing, putting a picture in your head like this. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I liked near the beginning here, Rand is he's worrying about Bella. He's the one that suggested bringing her along. Egwene is riding her. He's thinking about that and hoping she can keep up, and doesn't quite know that Moraine's going to be doing this magic on the horses yet. And he's like, with all his heart and desperation, he silently shouted at Bella to run like the wind, silently tried to her. Run! His skin pricked, and his bones felt as if they were freezing, ready to split open. The light helper, run! And Bella ran. And that, I don't know, but that felt to me like maybe me a little hint that Rand might be doing a little magical channeling there.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that, Sean. That's a good thought.
Could you say he's touching the taint?
Yeah, I would say that it's a possibility that he touched the taint there. And it says that reaction that he has, his bones were freezing, ready to split open. That certainly sounds like something. It's like he's just naturally, instinctively trying to do what Moraine ends up doing later. What is even possible, but he just doesn't know. And that sort of goes along also with later Moraine is having a conversation with Egwene, and they're talking about her ability to channel the true source, and basically says that Egwene's a natural at it and that she might know what she's doing, but she's doing it. So yeah, I don't know. That seemed like a possibility there.
I'd underline this section too, but just because I was noting how freaked out he seemed, like it just seemed like, wow, that description of both his bones freezing or whatever was. But yeah, I hadn't put it together yet, but that's a good call out. So they make it to Watch Hill in record time. Like Rand isn't even aware of what he's seeing when he sees the lights at this next village. And they kind of go blasting through it. And this is where they kind of take a break. And Rand's like, are we just going to spend the night here then? Right? We're just going to like chill here, which is just kind of hilarious. Like, no, we got to cover some ground, dude.
The Queen Amidala meme, like, we're going to have mutton pie, right? We're going to have mutton pie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all getting excited about that inn. They're like, it's not as cool as our inn, but it's an okay inn. I'd really go for some tea right now.
We probably need to sing a little bit, guys. Don't you think we need to sing?
Yeah, after all, it's winter now. Is it? No, I guess it's the next day. It's Beltane.
I mean, I went to the White Boar Inn. It was pretty cool. It wasn't as cool as the Wine Spring, but it was pretty cool. They have like mutton pie and stuff.
I do want to call out, just have my one call out of Robert Jordan's writing for what you guys think of this sentence, just the second half of it mostly, but the wind of the Drakhar's wings beat at Rand with a feel like the touch of slime, like chittering in the dank dimness of a nightmare. I was like, chittering. I always thought little chatter, is like, and that's pretty much what it is when I looked it up.
Is it? Okay.
It could be an animal or something, but it's kind of a little like.
I thought it also could like describe like the rustling of bugs.
Yeah.
Right.
Chittenness.
I think that's kind of the sound they make, yeah. But like the wings beat at him and feel like the touch of slime, like chittering in the dank dimness of a nightmare. Like, what does that even mean?
Those are three things that are different to really flow for me. I also kind of noted this. I did like the one before that when they're describing the scream. That's cool. A scream ripped the darkness. A sound like a man dying under sharp knives. Cool. That's like a brutal image. So that sounds like great. It's not like a scream ripped through the darkness, like the opening of an envelope after your aunt's marriage. Like, well, that doesn't make sense.
I picture in the what was the tavern's name?
The White Boar, yeah.
When the like someone does the record scratch, but then the Fonz goes back over to the jukebox, pounds it, and the party starts right back up.
Rocking around the Beltane pole, it's a happy night.
When they're stopped there, though, before they take off again, Rand is standing there and he hears the Drakkar and all that, and then he's pulled out his sword. He all of a sudden notices everyone's like staring at him, and he's like on his horse ready to go, and they're just like, Rand, what the fuck are you doing? And he's just standing there with the sword, and he like tries to carefully, without anyone seeing, put it away and hope that nobody saw it. I love that Rand is constantly just like, he's more worried about stuff like that than he is about danger that's clearly following them. I hope nobody sees me look stupid.
If any of his friends had noticed the sword, he would surely hear about it later. I also just noticed just generally throughout these chapters, like I can remember being a teen and like still like this myself, but like they're all kind of assholes to each other. They're not nice friends. They're kind of mean friends sometimes.
I don't remember having nice friends at that age.
Yeah.
Or being a
True.
Oh, I thought Ben, you were, I guess we weren't quite that young, or maybe we were, but you were a nice friend.
We were nice, but you're always making fun of each other for being adopted or having divorced parents.
Oh yeah, I guess we were. We didn't have a joke like that for you. Yeah.
I know. I was just a perfect angel. Or maybe I was just too sensitive. I couldn't take it.
You're just a sweet little boy. You were always our sweet little Ben boy.
Especially with guys that I think as teenagers or young, weakness to like be sensitive and nice to each other. So, even if you do that, sometimes it has to be disguised through other ways. It can't be direct. So, most of your direct things are just ribbing and being mean to each other, but so funny.
Yeah, you're right, but fuck you anyway, Sean.
Fuck you. I love you.
I like, though, they start out back on the road here, after Moraine gets the horses going again with some magic. And then Egwene, Rand looks, she's just like, she just has a huge smile on her face and her braid is streaming out behind her with the horse's mane. And he keeps talking about how she has a gleam in her eyes that he thinks is not all from the moon.
She's horse girling, so
like gaping at her, watching this, like, I imagine this like anime looking scene with the moon behind her and her eyes are flashing and he's like, and then all of a sudden with his mouth open, it says that, I had to look up what this was, but his mouth dries until a swallowed bite me.
I think they mentioned it earlier, like as like something that hawks are going after. Yeah,
it's like a mosquito.
It's like a no-see-um.
I looked that up.
That's some lazy world building. We got bugs that bite me. What do you? Shit, they call them bite me's.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he swallows a bite me and it sets him off to a fit of coughing. But I love that he's like looking at Egwene having this moment where he thinks she's all glorious. And then he just all of a sudden swallows a bug and it's like, and the moment for him.
And then this is where Moraine starts to like call up the fog, which is kind of a cool thing. The Drakkar screams in rage as they start to disappear into this thick fog.
It's pretty classic magic stuff.
And then they keep riding and then it just kind of says, it has, as Rand was sure.
It sort of explains her plan later, but I did think it was kind of useless so that they got this fog because, like, it's only so big and the thing is the Drakkar's flying above them and it can just go higher and look down and, like, it sees where the fog is. It's not really helping them.
And sees where the road is going, too, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
They're going to Taren Ferry on the road to Taren Ferry. But I get it. You need to kind of keep yourself hidden. It's screaming and freaking everybody. And finally, they get to Taren Ferry.
Yeah, they have to trust a Taren Ferry man. Maybe they don't quite trust him, actually, but
Don't think they do.
I did like the way it describes these houses as being tall with high redstone foundations, which is necessary when the spring melt comes from the mountains of mist, it says. That's cool. I like that. It makes sense and it gives me a certain image in my head. This kind of small town with tall buildings and then this ferry that seems to be like, there's 6 men that come with this guy across, and like that has to be a pretty big earner in that town and help its existence in general.
Yeah, there's like Master Hightower owns like the biggest piece of infrastructure in town, and it's crazy. It's a private enterprise, but yeah, I mean, he should be as important in this town, or more so than Bran Alvear is in back in Emmons Fields. So he just owns a 1,000-year-old inn. Like, shit, it's just really old.
They waken Master Hightower, awaken him, and Rand is like, he has the classic thoughts about he had met few people from Taren Ferry, and he tries to recall what little he knew about him, and it's like, man, you guys hate them so much for knowing nothing about him. They ventured down into what they called the lower villages with their noses up as if they smelled something bad. And like, geez. It says they had a reputation for slyness and trickery, and if you shook hands with a Terry man, people said you counted your fingers afterwards. Holy shit.
He really plays up this rivalry a lot. Like, I like that he kind of leans into it, but it's, it's a little bit strange name like Hilltop or Stoneboat. Yeah, sure, Rand al'Thor. That's a real weird name.
It's pretty, I think, I don't know if you would say metaphorically, but this chapter marks by the crossing of the river divides them from the, and then now they're in the rest of the series. And Taren Ferry is the last of their worries. We've built this world in the last 12 chapters and it's basically over for them.
Yeah, Taren Ferry's the worst world, obviously.
So they start spreading out some gold. They get Hightower to agree to a late night fog bound crossing, which he would never do. Which, I mean, I get, like, hey, I understand, but also what it sounds like a bunch of guys pulling ropes on a boat. I don't understand what really about night or fog would be dangerous, but,
Flotsam, jetsam, that's pretty much it.
Oh, yeah, the flotsam and the jetsam. Yeah, we do have to be aware of that.
But just imagine being that you just have these strangers show up in the middle of the night like that and they pay you a bunch of gold. I mean, it's so clear that they're running from something urgent and you have to know you're getting into danger when that happens. Like, there's no way it's not dangerous.
Yeah. Like, and if somebody showed up and offered me, I mean, the equivalent of a year's wage or 2 years' wage,
Right.
I would, yeah, it would be hard, or it would be easy to not ask questions. But obviously, I don't know. Does he get ahead of this deal? We'll find out next chapter.
And before we get into that, let's take a quick break and hear from this week's sponsor.
Oh, well, hi there. I didn't see you. Yep. I'm Paddin Fane the Peddler. I ride the girth and length of this fine land in my suspiciously large wagon, selling honest gewgaws and humble snake oils to fine rube. I mean, folks. And everywhere I go, people be asking me questions. Paddin Fane, where do you get your wonderful pins? Paddin Fane, why did this ring of Tamerlane you sold me turn my finger green? Paddin Fane, care for 8 horses all on your own. But you know what I don't hear questions about? My safety from Trolloc attacks. Now I know what you're thinking, sir, old good wife. I don't have some arcane connect one. Oh no, I just use Paddin Fane's patent-pending Trolloc repellent spray. A heavy spray drives the dark friends away. Now just ask Narg. No witchery required. Paddin Fane's patent-pending Trolloc repellent spray is made from honest grain alcohol and only the most masculine of herbs.
Paddin Fane's patent-pending Trolloc repellent against Myrdrolls or Goblins. All right, thank you to our sponsor, who suspiciously we seem to have just lost contact with. Let's get into chapter Across the Taren. After some tense moments at the docks, the group is uneventfully ferried across the Taren. On the opposite shore, they prepare to leave when suddenly a whirlpool forms under the ferry boat, destroying the vessel. Completely Rain pays the ferryman and his haulers extra coins for their troubles. Under the cover of trees, the Aes Sedai sends the cloud of fog further downriver, leading the Drakkar away from the party. Misdirection in place, the group settles into a camp for the night, which had been prepared by land in case it was needed. Moraine speaks to Egwene, revealing that she is naturally gifted with the ability to channel the true source and will be accepted for training in Tar Valon if she so desires. Enjoyed this chapter quite a bit, actually. A good amount to talk about here, but it's funny that all they're really doing is crossing a river and going to camp, but it's somehow a little bit exciting and interesting. I like how when they get there, Rand in his head, his thoughts of seeing the Taren, they go, I've never seen a river that's as big or with as strong currents as the Taren, but like it can't be that big. It's just a small town with a little ferry that goes across it, and like they're so isolated and from this one little area that they've never been out of that he's never even that big.
He's so parochial at times, it's really hilarious. It's the beginning of a fantasy story, so it's good, but it's almost silly to think about sometimes. Like, oh my god, look at this amazing town. Look at the houses that are different than the houses that I've ever seen before. I remember being a kid and traveling a little bit and being like, whoa, cool. They serve clam chowder and bread bowls.
I did have I had a question about something here at the beginning also that I don't know if you guys will have an answer to, or let's not spoil anything. Line where it says, only once did anyone speak loudly enough for Rand to hear clearly. You must handle it, Moraine said in answer to something unheard from Lan. He will remember too much as it is and no help for it. If I stand out in his thoughts. Do you guys think they're talking about Master Hightower, about the ferryman and some sort of plan here, and Moraine wants Lan to handle it because she doesn't want the guy to remember her as much when maybe he's questioned about this later? I don't know. What did you guys make of that? I don't think it talks about it.
Yeah, that's how I read it as well. That she does not want him to remember her in case something can read his mind or he's questioned or something. She's trying to keep out of his awareness. Like when Lan went and banged, stepped back into the fog and didn't really say anything. I think she's just trying to save having to do some more magic by having Lan just take care of it, which is what he's around for. Yeah.
Do you think it could be her telling him just to dispatch how?
I was thinking about that. Like, is he just going to murder her?
Is that against Aes Sedai? They have certain rules, but
we haven't got the full listing of the rules yet. So
one thing I liked here is Tom Merrill and crying and kind of being pissed off. And he's grumbling about not getting a hot meal and mulled wine or whatever. It's like, man, you 100% chose to join this party, and you can leave at any time you want. I don't think Moraine would stop Tom if he'd be like, no, I'm just going to chill here. I've gone as far as I want to go tonight. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, he's definitely the most dispensable member of the party at this point, but he does have a good moment here in a minute. They arrive at the docks and they're waiting for him to go up, and he shows up with 6 men, and Lan's like, shh, quiet everyone, as they approach, and strikes a pose. Lan like gets his sword ready to go, exposes it, and then everyone kind of, the boys, the young men, all look at Lan one at a time. Oh, okay, let me try to look dangerous too. And they all like show their weapon and strike. I think Rand even says like he's not sure if he could mimic Lan's deadly looking pose.
His dangerous slouch.
Yeah. Standing there like that. They do that, and then Tom Maryland's like, well, I don't want to be shown up. And he like raises his hands and flourishes an arm, and like, of course, a dagger appears from under his cloak. And I was like, there's no weapon dagger that would appear at this point from Tom Maryland. That's the only possible thing there.
A classic D&D group like flexing when they get to like a bar, like an inn, or when they're meeting like a rival faction.
Tom Maryland clearly his character sheet over and is like, what do I got in my inventory? Dagger. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Basic adventure supplies.
Well, he literally makes them laugh. Like everyone starts laughing at it. Egwene claps.
Yes. Moraine, yeah.
They have this little tense moment, which what do you guys think about? Because like at first I was like, okay, do they think that they're going to be robbed by the Taren Ferry folk, which is very on brand? Just like, oh, these Taren Ferry guys, they're which is clearly what Lan's like, you know, let's be careful. Do we have another mob on our hands here? Or what's the interaction going to be? And they sort of flash more gold and they're like, okay, we'll take you across. But also there's like a moment where the ferryman tells them that the gold the first half of it is already hidden away. Like, what does he think that now that they got them out there, I guess, that they're going to like hold them up and get the gold back and still force them to take them across the river? Like, I don't know what exactly they thought was going to happen there.
Did seem to strike a little weird to me because there's nothing really in the description of these guys showing up that seems threatening.
Yeah.
It's more that Lan shows his sword, and then like one by one they all just start like showing their old weapon. I feel like they actually, Moraine starts laughing maybe just at how stupid this all looks. Like Lan was just trying to show like, hey, I've got my sword, and then suddenly like Rand is showing his sword, and Perrin's showing his axe. Oh, but now this dead's flipping everywhere. Did seem kind of silly because you need 6 big dudes to make this ferry work. So 6 big guys showing up kind of looking pissed off in the middle of the night kind of makes sense at this point.
Speaking of that, the 6 guys and how this works, I went on a little bit of a rabbit hole trying to figure this out. I got very confused by the description of how this ferry even works once they started doing it. There's a rope that goes across the river, right? That makes sense. When I looked up also, it seemed like a lot of the time it would have been a chain, which makes a lot more sense to me. I feel like a rope would not last long, but maybe it would. Maybe a big enough one. But let me read the description of this. The ferry lurched as its mooring. The strong current caught it, then lurched again as the guide ropes held it. The haulers, 3 to a side, grabbed hold of the ropes at the front of the ferry and laboriously began walking toward the back, muttering uneasily as they edged out onto the gray cloak. It makes sense to you guys that they were able to they hold the rope, I guess, and then they walk backwards? So it's like their feet are moving the boat, I guess, so they're sort of hanging off the rope. It doesn't have to be like the boat doesn't have to be that heavy because it's wood and it's just carrying horses and people.
And it's all about momentum, right? Like it's going to be hard at first, but then once it gets going, yeah, I mean, there's still ferries that operate like.
I looked into this. There's one ferry I could find in the world that sort of operates like that. But the way a lot of these ferries worked would actually be that you would have that rope across the river and then you would sort of pull yourself towards the rope as you build that momentum, but you're pulling yourself towards the rope and then you're letting the current drag you across the river a little bit at a time. So it's just like a process of like pulling yourself, then letting it slack again, then pulling yourself towards the rope again. But like the moving The boat seems kind of weird to me. And then I looked this up, and there's a place in Los Ebanos, Texas, which goes across the Rio Grande at like a pretty short point of crossing. And it's the only handoff that I could find, at least on the Mexican border. Maybe there's some in like small places around the world. But I looked up videos of how this works, and it's a big metal boat and everything. And yeah, there's just dudes with this rope, and they're just pull on it. They just kind of pull on the rope, and then they're able to get across. So I guess it depends on what the current's doing and all that, how strong it is. But I just expected that's more what they would have been doing to get across than the walking thing, which seemed weird. It would work all right.
And this has been an episode of Ferry Fellas.
What they're describing is kind of like the dudes form a conveyor belt, right? And like they grab the rope and they start to walk towards the back of the boat and they turn around. That does feel like then half the guys at any given time walking back down the rope, whereas if everyone just stood in a line and just heaved and pulled as if it were like a tug of war or like pulling up the anchor on an old-timey boat or some shit, that seems a lot more effective than this walking he is describing. You could maybe need only 4 stout men instead of 6 if everyone was just pulling evenly together and maybe singing a song in a jaunty tune to time their pulls.
I think we're going to need a episode from the Rio Grande as we test this in the field.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is it? Only $2?
Yeah, $2.75.
Yeah, that seems fun. I don't really want to visit the Texas-Mexico border, but yeah, all right.
And the other way that makes sense that I saw was that, you could just attach the boat to the rope that goes across and then use poles or whatever, or oars, and just kind of use it to keep you in place and go across and make sure you don't float downriver with the current. It's too clever.
I mean, because that's actually a difficult thing about crossing a river is the current is always going to push the boat further downstream if you're just wanting to go back and forth. So having to, I can understand if you just want to cross the river at the same place, it's pretty difficult to do unless you have like some kind of guide rope.
Yeah.
So to get across the river, and then this lovely boat that we've been admiring so much and talking about so much does not have a great fate.
Clearly, it's very clear from the start of this that Moraine with magic. They immediately basically pull out money and they're like, oh no, it's fine. I mean, it sucks that this happened. I don't know what that was. That's crazy. The hauler guys are like, there's no whirlpools on the Taren. What the fuck? So he just kind of pays them money on, and I think that's the end of that.
Well, they move on, but they just run south along the river. It says, but like, where are they going, guys? Is there a bridge somewhere? There's no like Taren bridge.
Well, they may think they took a traditional boat.
We don't really know what else is on this river. So I was just like, man, how far do these guys have to go with all that gold? And then traveling in your night shirts and underwear. I know it didn't describe it like this, but this whole time I've been imagining Master Hightower as old-timey nightcap and nightgown.
Yeah, I did look up because I was curious, whirlpools in general and how real they are. And most of what we think of as whirlpools in stories and all that are options that basically sailors would give to each other, horror stories that sailors would spread around back in the day where it's like, oh, there's this giant whirlpool out there in the ocean. It'll suck your ship in and it's wrecked all these ships and blah, blah, blah. But none of that was really that true. Occasionally a small ship in a few places in the world might go down because of a whirlpool. But most of the time they're very temporary because either something is just draining in the water around there or the whirlpool is like not strong enough to really do. And they're usually caused just by like tides colliding or winds and, little events that don't last a long time. So it's a pretty small temporary thing. And so it seems to me that I guess it makes sense that these guys would be superstitious enough to like think maybe it could be a real thing like that. They could be dangerous to ships, but also they mention they don't happen on this river. So Moraine and Lan are just like, okay, let's get the fuck out of here because they're going to start asking questions soon.
I think they attribute it to the thing that this weird lady causing this whirlpool is even more of probably a difficult thing for them to wrap their heads around. So they just kind of got to scoot on out of there.
Once they pay up for the ferry, those cutthroat Taren Ferry boys are scattered trying to backstab each other and steal each other's share.
I underline this. With a frightened, inarticulate cry, the ferryman snatched the coins, which is like a frightened, inarticulate cry, and grabs the coins and runs away.
Yeah, so they've got across, and they basically, once they're over there and ready to go, Moraine's like, okay, I'm going to send this fog further down the river and hopefully trick the Drakkar into thinking that we're headed downriver, either on the ferry. And that seems to be what happens, because the Drakkar can hear it from above, shrieking as it goes down the river away from them.
Yep.
And so they just kind of go into the trees.
And she kind of lore dumps a little bit like, oh, and here's some stuff about the Drakkar. Dangerous, but they're not super smart. They got to report to the Myrddraal. It'll probably just go back. Like she does, like put a lot of energy suddenly into explaining why this river fog trick is so important.
They go and they find this Lan has like already set up ahead of time. He was like, oh, this might be a good place to stop later. I'll like build a fire and have it ready to go. So he just lights up this fire and they see what it is. And it's like there's this area in the trees where I think like a flood at one point.
Yeah, I got it here. A good 100 spans from the Taren, they came to a dark mound beside a clearing. Here a long ago flood had undermined and toppled an entire stand of leather leaves, washing them together into a great thick tangle, massive trunks and branches and roots. Moraine stopped, and suddenly a light appeared low to the ground coming from under the heap of trees. So it's just like, yeah, a big old mess of fallen trees in the woods.
It did seem a little unlikely or implausible exactly like this, but I guess maybe it could.
Yeah. You ever been to, this is near Portland, but Oneota Gorge? In the Columbia River Gorge, there's like a little branch that shoots off.
A gorget.
A gorget, like a subgorge. And there's tons of trees and stuff that have been washed out into this thing over time because it floods all the time. And yeah, I can see like there's piles of trees 20, 30 feet tall, just logs and stuff. And you could probably climb down in there and find some nice spaces. I wouldn't want to. This seems, they kind of allude to it. Lan was like, hey, Moraine, hold on, just stop here for a second, babe. I got to go over and prep this mound of trees. So just stay here, babe.
It's not too uncomfortable waters for tree stumps and trunks to pile up together.
Backing up just a little bit up the page, Moraine says what might be my favorite line of dialogue in the book so far, where she says, you all want explanations, but if I to you and I have no time for anything else. And I'm just going to start saying that all the fucking time now. I could explain myself to you, but if I did that, I'd be explaining myself all the time. So I can't do this.
She's getting a little tired.
Yeah.
A little grouchy.
Yeah, Moraine is, I wrote down that she seems, I get these little sociopathic vibes sometimes from Moraine where she's just like, yeah, whatever. I had to like sink their ship and, fuck, I don't care what happens to them. We got business. Just like that line about how she doesn't have to explain herself. She doesn't have much time for empathy, I'll put it that way.
Talk a lot about hobbling these horses. I didn't actually look that up, but maybe do that live. This one looks brutal, okay. But it's basically to keep a horse. So you could probably do this safely and nicely, and I shouldn't be too freaked out by it, but the pictures do not look pleasant. He's just like, oh, don't worry, kids. I've got these ropes here, and they're for the horses. That's all right.
For you, I promise. But yeah, he also tells them, talking about the horses, that apparently they will just drop dead from exhaustion if they don't actually rest, even though due to this magic power, they feel energized all the time. Like, I guess what he's saying is that the power fools them, they're not tired and they're able to keep going, but it's not really true, which is interesting how that works.
I like the idea that the magic always has these kind of costs to it.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dangerous. Like you could very easily accidentally kill.
That's kind of like crystal meth.
Yeah, they settle in there, and Moraine, she's having a conversation with Egwene. She pulls her aside, but everyone can hear, and they're all individually pretending like they're not listening, but every single person is listening. Tom Maryland care a lot about what he's doing with his pipe and shit. But at the same time, Moraine is also lore dumping here, where she talks about the true source and how the male half is Sidin and Sidar is the female half, and how they work and against each other at the same time, which sort of goes along with all the themes we've explored with dark and light and those forces counterbalancing each other. And then she gets to a point where she's like, well, you could do this too. And she pulls and like a little blue stone or something and shows it to Egwene. She's like,
hey kid, you want to channel? Come to my van and channel with me.
You can light this up. Come on, do it. And then they do it, and then could be either way. Oh no, I didn't do anything. And Moraine's like, no, the last one, That was all you. I didn't help at all.
Just giving her a taste.
Yeah.
There's a significant, kind of exchange between Tom and Rand where Rand's trying to intervene or be like, Egwene, don't do it. And he's like, it's too late, boy. She's the towers now. It's beyond you now.
I like that. I thought it was a poignant moment.
It just goes with that symbolic dividing line of the Taren and their previous lives, and they can't go.
As she gets over the Taren, somebody's like, oh, now she's getting into this world of the Aes Sedai. It seems interesting that Moraine has gone from like not knowing she was on the journey to training her immediately, like on their first night, tired.
Yeah, Egwene's like, I can become an Aes Sedai, and Rand just like cracks his head on the roof immediately. He's like, oh, what? Tom Maryland's like, no, boy, stop.
Yeah, I keep underlining in this chapter like the negative lines that Rand is thinking in his head about Egwene. She has to fail. She has to. I was like, I don't know where the line is here where I can kind of understand and sympathize with Rand.
Yeah. Oh, I wrote that he's a bitchy boy.
Yeah, why is it so important? He's not accomplishing things. Why is that so necessary for you, dude?
Yeah, it says he dug his fingers into his knees and clenched his jaw until they hurt. Like, wow, dude.
I mean, I think a part of it is like I think he distrustful of the Aes Sedai, and he's distrustful of channeling and all that stuff, and doesn't like Egwene being part of it. And also the fact clearly that everything is taking her further away, quote unquote, from him, even though he's with her right now.
I did like some of the last lines of this chapter. Moraine's talking to Egwene. She goes, you may go far, perhaps even the Amerlin seat one day if you study and work hard. Come on.
Then you too can be the president of the United States.
You mean, with a cry of delight, Egwene threw her arms around the Aes Sedai. Oh, thank you. Rand, did you hear? I'm going to be an Aes Sedai.
Oh, man.
What a great bit of a dramatic irony after he's been clenching his jaw the whole chapter.
Those end of those chapters. At this point, I can't say that it's not on purpose. Like Robert Jordan playing little jokes sometimes at the end of these chapters for sure.
I mean, I feel like every day he sat down and tried to write a chapter and then like end it in a funny way.
One of previewing into chapter 13, a new map.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I'm excited about the map, but it's also, I looked at it like, I don't know any of these places. Cool.
We're going to find out.
And that wraps up of the Bridge Burners Book Club. We would love it if you follow us on Instagram at Bridge Burners Book Club, on Twitter at Bridge Burners BC, and find us on YouTube at Bridge Burners Book Club, where we will be posting full episodes, clips, and polls going forward. If you would like to write in, shoot us an email at bridgeburnersbc@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or contentions, and maybe we'll read them on air. You can also join our Discord with the link in the episode description for discussions, questions, or to post your best. It really helps if you give us a rating on Apple or Google Podcasts, so please consider helping the show grow. I'm the Sean Chan, and for my co-hosts, Ben Bowie and Tyler the Creator, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week. as I rounded, felt muscular and compact, like corned beef.